Earlier this week, the Korean government and the country's leading chip makers unveiled massive investment plans to build chip clusters and AI data centers aimed at solidifying its status as a global artificial intelligence powerhouse. For more on this, we're joined today by Dr. Park Ju-yong, professor at the Graduate School of Cultural Technology at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. Professor Park, thanks for coming on today.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
So this plan has raised concerns over electricity demand, with estimates suggesting the country would need the equivalent of 20 new nuclear reactors by 2040. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so that number 20 comes from the 28 gigawatts considered necessary by 2040. And to take things into perspective, that is more than 5 times the entire metropolitan city of Seoul consumes. So it's a very serious and important issue. Now let us look at what's happening with the Yongin cluster that is currently being built with the goals of completion in 2027 and 2042. So Yongin will require about 15 gigawatts by its completion, but now only 12 have been secured, meaning there are continued challenges, and this tentative Honam cluster calls for even more. Now, in addition to the sheer scale of power necessary for the industry, semiconductor manufacturing is such a delicate, precise process that requires an absolute stable power supply. So when the government is talking about using renewable energy sources like solar power from the area, experts are immediately sensing a huge challenge because solar power and many renewable sources really cannot compare with other sources like nuclear as far as stability goes. At night, when it's cloudy, the power generation takes a dip, and you don't want that for semiconductor manufacturing. So there are proposed solutions like giant power banks called ESSs, but they have their own issues. And so people are thinking that maybe renewables, more traditional ways of power generation is necessary. But remember that this government actually has been going on a rather different direction as far as nuclear is concerned. And the question is, will they be willing to change their positions for the Honam cluster? And so expect a lot of debate going forward.
Right, right. And another challenge is the massive amount of water the project will require. And given these demands, is building AI infrastructure in the Southwest region a realistic plan?
Yeah, so also water is another resource that is crucial for the fabrication. And even here, there are some criticisms and worries that the government did not initially provide a realistic plan to supply the water that is needed, more than vague promises and rather optimistic prospects. And they're not really helping themselves at this moment because initially the government guaranteed that somehow 1 million additional tons of water could be supplied from the area. But just a couple of days later, they lowered the number to 0.65. So there are really questions if you really look into it. So what does all this mean also with the power, right? So, well, technology is often the solution to problems. So it remains to be seen what kind of ingenuity or large-scale infrastructure plans can be pulled out of people's brains to solve these problems. But at this point, again, there are valid reasons to question whether the goals are realistic, both technologically and economically. And again, would the government be able to or willing to change their directions regarding waterway projects? Because traditionally, they have been against it. So whether they will change their minds quickly enough and in a substantial way, we'll also have to see.
Right. And a lot of attention is also on how these companies and the Korean government will attract researchers and skilled workers to the country's southwestern regions instead of the capital area. What will it take to make that happen?
Yeah, so many high-skilled workers are necessary for this process, and that has been one of the reasons that the surrounding areas of Seoul, meaning Gyeonggi-do, and also that involves Suwon and Yongin, have been the sites of choice for these facilities. So even my workplace, KAIST, is planning a second campus majorly dedicated to semiconductors in Pyeongtaek, also in Gyeonggi-do, which means that they decided that even Daejeon, the original seat of KAIST, is too far away, even though it is closer to Gyeonggi-do than Honam is. So with that in mind, we also have to acknowledge that Honam has its own prestigious science universities like the Gwangju Institute of Science and Technology and Kentech. So educating the talent may be feasible, but to attract talent, you need to make the area attractive in many other ways too, because when you're highly skilled, it's not just a job or just about the housing, right? You want a certain level of quality of life. And undoubtedly, for those who like urban settings, Seoul and Gyeonggi-do, again, are not really easy to compete with. So it's about the culture and things like good schools necessary to sustain a family life in the long term for the highly educated. And so the question is, can they get those ready in time? And I think this may be the toughest task yet, since it's not a fixed design issue like semiconductor facilities, as expensive as they are. It's about the way of life, that may be even more complex and may take longer time to develop.
I see. And before I let you go, some analysts also argue that Korea is focused on sustaining the current semiconductor boom while China and Taiwan have been investing in the next generation of technologies for years. What do you think is needed to ensure the plan's long-term success?
Yes, I think this is a fantastic question. And I think also from the industry's point of view, this may be the most relevant and critical one. So where is the future of this technology headed? Is it okay for Koreans to look forward to keep riding, as you say, the current demand for these products? So the semiconductor industry famously follows the boom and bust cycle. So when it's doing well, it's really doing well. But when it slows down, it can be years and years of painful waiting until the boom returns. And that is why, even though we are seeing an unprecedented level of global demand in memory chips, those companies were reluctant to quickly build new facilities because once a bust cycle sets in, it can be a huge financial liability, right? So if the government thinks the boom cycle is reason enough to go ahead with the project, history tells us that we have to be more cautious. And AI data centers do not appear to be a long-term answer either because in many parts of the world, they have proven to be an environmental liability with as yet no profitability. So what do we have to do? So, well, we should be really focusing on not just enlarging or hyperscaling AI, but on making truly intelligent ones that people can rely on in real critical situations. Because so far, the AI is still too unreliable for us to give our full trust. So what kind of a different approach may be necessary? This might be fun to listen to. So have you heard that a lot of foreign AI companies are hiring many, many philosophers now? Because they are realizing that for a truly good AI, understanding human behavior and intelligence is better than and more crucial, even more so than faster and bigger hardware. So a new future technology, I also think, will come out of those out-of-box thinking and planning, and we may also need to start now.
Right, absolutely. All right, Professor Park, thank you so much for your time and insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.